Hi there and welcome. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're going to read 3 more chapters today for our daily reading of Glinda of Oz by L. Frank Baum. If you remember our reading from the day before Thanksgiving on Wednesday, we had Queen Coo turned into a swan by the supreme dictator of the Flatheads, but not before she submerged the island of the Skeezers under the water. But with Queen Coo as a swan, she no longer remembers magic, and no one can bring the island back to the surface. Dorothy decides that she will try to look for the 3 adepts that were changed into fish, and Ozma tries to find out if she can discover how Queen Coo magic worked. So we're going to pick up our story here with chapter 13, which is The Alarm Bell. Glinda the Good, in her palace in the Quadling country, had many things to occupy her mind, for not only did she look after the weaving and embroidery of her bevy maids, and assist all those who came to her to implore her help, beasts and birds, as well as people, but she was a close student of the arts of sorcery, and spent much time in her magical laboratory, where she strove to find a remedy for every evil and to perfect her skill in magic. Nevertheless, she did not forget to look in the great book of records each day to see if any mention was made of the visit of Ozma and Dorothy to the enchanted mountain of the Flatheads and the magic isle of the Skeezers. The records told her that Ozma had arrived at the mountain, that she had escaped with her companion and gone to the island of the Skeezers, and that Queen Coo had submerged the island so that it was entirely under water. Then came the statement that the Flatheads had come to the lake to poison the fishes, and that their supreme dictator had transformed Queen Coo into a swan. No other details were given in the great book, and so Glinda did not know that since Queen Coo had forgotten her magic, none of the Skeezers knew how to raise the island to the surface again. So Glinda was not worried about Ozma and Dorothy until one morning, while she sat with her maids, there came a sudden clang of the great alarm bell. This was so unusual that every maid gave a start, and even the sorceress for a moment could not think what the alarm meant. Then she remembered the ring she had given to Dorothy when she left the palace to start on her adventure. In giving the ring, Glinda had warned the little girl not to use its magic powers unless she and Ozma were in real danger. But then she was to turn it on her finger, once to the right and once to the left, and Glinda's alarm bell would ring. So the sorceress now knew that danger threatened her beloved ruler and Princess Dorothy, and she hurried to her magic room to seek information as to what sort of danger it was. The answer to her question was not very satisfactory, for it was only, Ozma and Dorothy are prisoners in the great dome of the Isle of the Skeezers, and the dome is under the water of the lake. Hasn't Ozma the power to raise the island to the surface? Inquired Glinda. No, was the reply, and the record refused to say more, except that Queen Coo, who alone could command the island to rise, had been transformed by the Flathead Sudic into a diamond swan. Then Glinda consulted the past records of the Skeezers in the Great Book. After diligent search, she discovered that Coo was a powerful sorceress who had gained most of her power by treacherously transforming the adepts of magic who were visiting her into 3 fishes, gold, silver, and bronze, after which she had them cast into the lake. Glinda reflected earnestly on this information and decided that someone must go to Ozma's assistance. While there was no great need of haste, because Ozma and Dorothy could live in a submerged dome a long time, it was evident that they could not get out until someone was able to raise the island. The sorceress looked through all her recipes and books of sorcery, but could find no magic that would raise a sunken island. Such a thing had never before been required in sorcery. Then Glinda made a little island, covered by a glass dome, and sunk it in a pond near her castle, and experimented in magical ways to bring it to the surface. She made several such experiments, but all were failures. It seemed a simple thing to do, yet she could not do it. Nevertheless, the wise sorceress did not despair of finding a way to liberate her friends. Finally, she concluded that the best thing to do was to go to the Skeezer country and examine the lake. While there, she was more likely to discover a solution to the problem that bothered her and to work out a plan for the rescue of Ozma and Dorothy. So Glinda summoned her storks and her aerial chariot, and telling her maids she was going on a journey and might not return soon, she entered the chariot and was carried swiftly to the Emerald City. In Princess Ozma's palace, the Scarecrow was now acting as ruler of the land of Oz. There wasn't much for him to do, because all of the affairs of state moved so smoothly, but he was there in case anything unforeseen should happen. Glinda found the Scarecrow playing croquet with Trot and Betsy Bobbin, two little girls who lived at the palace under Ozma's protection and were great friends of Dorothy and much loved by all the Oz people. "Something's happened!" cried Trot as the chariot of the sorceress descended near them. "Glinda never comes here except something's gone wrong." "I hope no harm has come to Ozma or Dorothy," said Betsy anxiously, as the lovely sorceress stepped down from her chariot. Glinda approached the Scarecrow and told him of the dilemma of Ozma and Dorothy, and she added, "We must save them somehow, Scarecrow." "Of course," replied the Scarecrow, stumbling over a wicket and falling flat on his painted face. The girls picked him up and patted his straw stuffing into shape, and he continued, as if nothing had occurred. "But you'll have to tell me what to do, for I have never raised a sunken island in all my life." "We must have a council of state as soon as possible," proposed the sorceress. "Please, send messengers to summon all of Ozma's counselors to this palace. Then we can decide what is best to be done." The Scarecrow lost no time in doing this. Fortunately, most of the royal counselors were in the Emerald City or near to it, so they all met in the throne room of the palace that same evening. Chapter 14. Ozma's Counselors. No ruler ever had such a queer assortment of advisors as Princess Ozma had gathered about her throne. Indeed, in no other country could such amazing people exist. But Ozma loved them for their peculiarities and could trust every one of them. First, there was the Tin Woodman. Every bit of him was tin, brightly polished. All his joints were kept well oiled and moved smoothly. He carried a gleaming axe to prove he was a woodman, but seldom had cause to use it, because he lived in a magnificent tin castle in the Winkie country of Oz, and was the emperor of all the Winkies. The Tin Woodman's name was Nick Chopper. He had a very good mind, but his heart was not of much account, so he was very careful to do nothing unkind or to hurt anyone's feelings. Another counselor was Scraps, the Patchwork Girl of Oz, who was made of a gaudy patchwork quilt, cut into shape and stuffed with cotton. This patchwork girl was very intelligent, but so full of fun and mad pranks that a lot of more stupid folks thought she must be crazy. Scraps was jolly under all conditions, however grave they might be, but her laughter and good spirits were of value in cheering others, and in her seemingly careless remarks, much wisdom could often be found. Then there was the Shaggy Man, shaggy from head to foot, hair and whiskers, clothes and shoes, but very kind and gentle, and one of Ozma's most loyal supporters. Tik-Tok was there, a copper man with machinery inside him, so cleverly constructed that he moved, spoke, and thought by 3 separate clockworks. Tik-Tok was very reliable, because he always did exactly what he was wound up to do. But his machinery was liable to run down at times, and then he was quite helpless until wound up again. A different sort of person was Jack Pumpkinhead, one of Ozma's oldest friends and her companion on many adventures. Jack's body was very crude and awkward, being formed of limbs of trees of different sizes, jointed with wooden pegs. But it was a substantial body, and not likely to break or wear out, and when it was dressed with the clothes, covered much of its roughness. The head of Jack Pumpkinhead was, as you have guessed, a ripe pumpkin, with the eyes, nose, and mouth carved upon one side. The pumpkin was stuck on Jack's wooden neck, and was liable to get turned sideways or backward, and then he would have to straighten it with his wooden hands. The worst thing about this sort of a head was that it did not keep well, and was sure to spoil sooner or later. So Jack's main business was to grow a field of fine pumpkins each year, and always, before his old head spoiled, he would select a fresh pumpkin from the field and carve the features on it very neatly, and have it ready to replace the old head whenever it became necessary. He didn't always carve it the same way, so his friends never knew exactly what sort of an expression they would find on his face. But there was no mistaking him, because he was the only pumpkin-headed man alive in the land of Oz. A one-legged sailor man was a member of Ozma's council. His name was Cap'n Bill, and he had come to the land of Oz with Trot, and had been made welcome on account of his cleverness, honesty, and good nature. He wore a wooden leg to replace the one he had lost, and was a great friend of all the children in Oz, because he could whittle all sorts of toys out of wood with his big jackknife. Professor H.M. Wogglebug T.E. was another member of the council. The H.M. meant highly magnified, for the professor was once a little bug, who became magnified to the size of a man, and always remained so. The T.E. meant that he was thoroughly educated. He was at the head of Princess Ozma's Royal Athletic College, and so that the students would not have to study and lose so much time that they could be devoted to athletic sports, such as football, baseball, and the like, Professor Wogglebug had invented the famous education pills. If one of the college students took a geography pill after breakfast, he knew his geography lesson in an instant. If he took a spelling pill, he at once knew his spelling lesson, and an arithmetic pill enabled the student to do any kind of sum without having to think about it. These useful pills made the college very popular, and taught the boys and girls of Oz their lessons in the easiest possible way. In spite of this, Professor Wogglebug was not a favorite outside of his college, for he was very conceited, and admired himself so much, and displayed his cleverness and learning so constantly, that no one cared to associate with him. Ozma found him of value in her councils, nevertheless. Perhaps the most splendidly dressed of all those present was a great frog as large as a man, called the Frogman, who was noted for his wise sayings. He had come to the Emerald City from the Yip country of Oz, and was a guest of honor. His long-tailed coat was of velvet, his vest of satin, and his trousers of finest silk. There were diamond buckles on his shoes, and he carried a gold cane and high silk hat. All of the bright colors were represented in his rich attire, so it tired one's eyes to look at him for long, until one became used to his splendor. The best farmer in all of Oz was Uncle Henry, who was Dorothy's own uncle, and who now lived near the Emerald City with his wife, Aunt Em. Uncle Henry taught the people of Oz how to grow the finest vegetables and fruits and grains, and was of much use to Ozma in keeping the royal storehouses well filled. He, too, was a counselor. The reason I mention the little Wizard of Oz last is because he was the most important man in the land of Oz. He wasn't a big man in size, but he was a big man in power and intelligence and second only to Glinda the Good in all the mystic arts of magic. Glinda had taught him, and the wizard and the sorceress were the only ones in Oz permitted by law to practice wizardry and sorcery, which they applied only to good uses and for the benefit of the people. The wizard wasn't exactly handsome, but he was pleasant to look at. His bald head was as shiny as if it had been varnished. There was always a merry twinkle in his eyes, and he was as spry as a schoolboy. Dorothy says the reason the wizard is not as powerful as Glinda is because Glinda didn't teach him all she knows. But what the wizard knows, he knows very well, and so he performs some very remarkable magic. The 10 I have mentioned assembled, with the Scarecrow and Glinda, in Osmos' throne room, right after dinner that evening, and the sorceress told them all she knew of the plight of Ozma and Dorothy. Of course, we must rescue them, she continued, and the sooner they are rescued, the better pleased they will be. But what we must now determine is how they can be saved. That is why I have called you together in a council. The easiest way, remarked the Shaggy Man, is to raise the sunken island of the Skeezers to the top of the water again. Tell me how, said Glinda. I don't know how, your highness, for I have never raised a sunken island. We might all get under it and lift it, suggested Professor Wogglebug. How can we get under it when it rests on the bottom of the lake? Asked the sorceress. Couldn't we throw a rope around it and pull it ashore? Inquired Jack Pumpkinhead. Why not pump the water out of the lake? Suggested the Patchwork Girl with a laugh. Do be sensible, pleaded Glinda. This is a serious matter, and we must give it serious thought. How big is the lake, and how big is the island? Was the Frogman's question. None of us can tell, for we have not been there. In that case, said the Scarecrow, it appears to me we ought to go to the Skeezer country and examine it carefully. Quite right, agreed the Tin Woodman. Will we have to go there anyhow? Remarked Tick-Tock in his jerky machinery voice. The question is, which of us shall go, and how many of us? Said the wizard. I shall go, of course, declared the Scarecrow. And I, said Scraps. It is my duty to Ozma to go, asserted the Tin Woodman. I could not stay away, knowing our loved princess is in danger, said the wizard. We all feel like that, said Uncle Henry. Finally, one and all present decided to go to the Skeezer country, with Glinda and the little wizard to lead them. Magic must meet magic in order to conquer it, so these 2 skillful magic workers were necessary to ensure the success of the expedition. They were all ready to start at a moment's notice, for none had any affairs of importance to attend to. Jack was wearing a newly made pumpkin head, and the Scarecrow had recently been stuffed with fresh straw. Tick-Tock's machinery was in good running order, and the Tin Woodman, as always, was well oiled. It is quite a long journey, said Glinda, and while I might travel quickly to the Skeezer country by means of my stork chariot, the rest of you will be obliged to walk. So, as we must keep together, I will send my chariot back to my castle, and we will plan to leave the Emerald City at sunrise tomorrow. Chapter 15. The Great Sorceress. Betsy and Trot, when they heard of the rescue expedition, begged the wizard to permit them to join it, and he consented. The Glass Cat, overhearing the conversation, wanted to go also, and to this the wizard made no objection. This Glass Cat was one of the real curiosities of Oz. It had been made and brought to life by a clever magician named Dr. Pippet, who was now not permitted to work magic, and was an ordinary citizen of the Emerald City. The cat was of transparent glass, through which one could plainly see its ruby heart beating and its pink brains whirling around in the top of its head. The Glass Cat's eyes were emeralds, Its fluffy tail was of spun glass and very beautiful. The ruby heart, while pretty to look at, was hard and cold, and the glass cat's disposition was not pleasant at times. It scorned to catch mice, did not eat, and was extremely lazy. If you complimented the remarkable cat on her beauty, she would be very friendly, for she loved admiration above everything. The pink brains were always working, and their owner was indeed more intelligent than most common cats. 3 other additions to the rescue party were made the next morning, just as they were setting out upon their journey. The first was a little boy named Button Bright, because he had no other name that anyone could remember. He was a fine, manly little fellow, well-mannered and good-humored, who had only one bad fault. He was continually getting lost. To be sure, Button Bright got found as often as he got lost, but when he was missing, his friends could not help being anxious about him. "Some day," predicted the Patchwork Girl, "he won't be found, and that will be the last of him." But that didn't worry Button Bright, who was so careless that he did not seem to be able to break the habit of getting lost. The second addition to the party was a Munchkin boy of about Button Bright's age, named Ojo. He was often called Ojo the Lucky, because good fortune followed him wherever he went. He and Button Bright were close friends, although of such different natures, and Trot and Betsy were fond of both. The third and last to join the expedition was an enormous lion, one of Ozma's regular guardians, and the most important and intelligent beast in all Oz. He called himself the Cowardly Lion, saying that every little danger scared him so badly that his heart thumped upon his ribs. But all who knew him knew that the Cowardly Lion's fears were coupled with bravery, and that however much might be frightened, he summoned courage to meet every danger he encountered. Often he had saved Dorothy and Ozma in times of peril, but afterward he moaned and trembled and wept because he had been so scared. "If Ozma needs help, I'm going to help her," said the great beast. "Also, I suspect the rest of you may need me on the journey, especially Trot and Betsy, for you may pass through a dangerous part of the country. I know that wild Gillikin country pretty well. Its forests harbor many ferocious beasts." They were glad the Cowardly Lion was to join them, and in good spirits, the entire party formed a procession and marched out of the Emerald City amid the shouts of the people, who wished them success and a safe return to their beloved ruler. They followed a different route from that taken by Ozma and Dorothy, for they went through the Winkie country and up north toward Oogaboo. But before they got there, they swerved to the left and entered the great Gillikin forest, the nearest thing to a wilderness in all of Oz. Even the Cowardly Lion had to admit that certain parts of this forest were unknown to him, although he had often wandered among the trees. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, who were great travelers, never had been there at all. The forest was only reached after a tedious tramp, for some of the rescue edition were quite awkward on their feet. The Patchwork Girl was as light as a feather and very spry. The Tin Woodman covered the ground as easily as Uncle Henry and the Wizard. But Tick-Tock moved slowly, and the slightest obstruction in the road would halt him until the others cleared it away. Then, too, Tick-Tock's machinery kept running down, so Betsy and Trot took turns winding him up. The Scarecrow was more clumsy, but less bother, for although he often stumbled and fell, he could scramble up again, and a little patting of his straw-stuffed body would put him in good shape again. Another awkward one was Jack Pumpkinhead, for walking would jar his head around on his neck, and then he would be likely to go in the wrong direction. But the Frogman took Jack's arm, and then he followed the path more easily. Cap'n Bill's wooden leg didn't prevent him from keeping up with the others, and the old sailor could walk as far as any of them. When they entered the forest of the Cowardly Lion took the lead. There was no path here for men, but many beasts had made paths of their own, which only the eyes of the lion, practiced in woodcraft, could discern. So he stalked ahead and wound his way in and out, the others following in single file, Glinda being next to the lion. There are dangers in the forest, of course, but as the huge lion headed the party, he kept the wild denizens of the wilderness from bothering the travelers. Once, to be sure, an enormous leopard sprang upon the glass cat and caught her in his powerful jaws. But he broke several of his teeth with howls of pain and dismay, dropped his prey, and vanished among the trees. "Are you hurt?" Trot asked anxiously of the glass cat. "How silly!" exclaimed the creature in an irritated tone of voice. "Nothing can hurt a glass cat. But I'm too solid to break easily. But I'm annoyed at that leopard's impudence. He has no respect for beauty or intelligence. If he had noticed my pink brain's work, I'm sure he would have realized I'm too important to be grabbed in a wild beast's jaws." "Never mind," said Trot consolingly. "I'm sure he won't do it again." They were almost in the center of the forest when Ojo, the Munchkin boy, suddenly said, "Why, where's Button-Bright?" They halted and looked around them. Button-Bright was not with the party. "Dear me," remarked Betsy, "I expect he's lost again." "When did you see him last, Ojo?" inquired Glinda. "It was some time ago," replied Ojo. "He was trailing along at the end and throwing twigs at the squirrels in the trees. Then I went to talk to Betsy and Trot, and just now I noticed he was gone." "That is too bad," declared the Wizard, "for it is sure to delay our journey. We must find Button-Bright before we go any farther, for this forest is full of ferocious beasts that would not hesitate to tear the boy to pieces." "But what shall we do?" asked the Scarecrow. "If any of us leaves the party to search for Button-Bright, he or she might fall victim to the beasts. And if the lion leaves us, we will have no protector." "The glass cat could go," suggested the Frogman. "The beasts can do her no harm, as we have discovered." The Wizard turned to Glinda. "Cannot your sorcery discover where Button-Bright is?" he asked. "I think so," replied the Sorceress. She called to Uncle Henry, who had been carrying her wicker box, to bring it to her, and when he obeyed, he opened it and drew out a small mirror. On the surface of the glass, she dusted a white powder and then wiped it away with her handkerchief and looked in the mirror. It reflected a part of the forest, and there, beneath a wide spreading tree, Button-Bright was lying asleep. On one side of him crouched a tiger ready to spring. On the other side was a big gray wolf. It bared its fangs, glistening in a wicked way. "Goodness me!" cried Trot, looking over Glinda's shoulder. "They'll catch him and kill him for sure." Everyone crowded around for a glimpse at the magic mirror. Pretty bad," said the Scarecrow sorrowfully. "Comes of getting lost," said Cap'n Bill, sighing. "Guess he's a goner," said the Frogman, wiping his eyes on his purple silk handkerchief. "But where is he? Can't we save him?" asked Ojo the Lucky. "If we knew where he is, we could probably save him," replied the little Wizard. "But that tree looks so much like all the other trees that we can't tell whether it's farther away or near by." "Look at Glinda!" exclaimed Betsy. Glinda, having handed the mirror to the Wizard, had stepped aside and was making strange passes with her outstretched arms and reciting in low, sweet tones a mystical incantation. Most of them watched the Sorceress with anxious eyes, despair giving way to the hope that she might be able to save their friend. The Wizard, however, watched the scene in the mirror, while over his shoulders peered Trot, the Scarecrow, and the Shaggy Man. What they saw was more strange than Glinda's actions. The tiger started to spring on the sleeping boy, but suddenly lost its power to move and lay flat upon the ground. The gray wolf seemed unable to lift its feet from the ground. It pulled first at one leg and then at the other, and finding itself strangely confined to the spot, began to back and snarl angrily. They couldn't hear the barkings and snarls, but they could see the creature's mouth open and its thick lips move. Button Bright, however, being but a few feet away from the wolf, heard its cries of rage, which wakened him from his untroubled sleep. The boy sat up and looked first at the tiger and then at the wolf. His face showed that for a moment he was quite frightened, but he soon saw that the beasts were unable to approach him, so he got upon his feet and examined them curiously, with a mischievous smile upon his face. Then he deliberately kicked the tiger's head with his foot, and catching up a fallen branch of a tree, he went to the wolf and gave it a good whacking. Both beasts were furious at such treatment, but could not resent it. Button Bright now threw down the stick, and with his hands in his pockets, wandered carelessly away. "Now," said Glinda, "let the glass cat run and find him. He is in that direction," pointing the way, "but how far off I do not know. Make haste and lead him back to us as quickly as you can." The glass cat did not obey everyone's orders, but she really feared the great sorceress, and so as soon as the words were spoken, the crystal animal darted away and was quickly lost to the sight. The wizard handed the mirror back to Glinda, for the woodland scene had now faded from the glass. Those who cared to rest sat down to await Button Bright's coming. It was not long before he appeared through the trees, and as he rejoined his friends, he said in a peevish tone, "Don't ever send that glass cat to find me again. She was very impolite, and if we didn't all know that she had no manners, I'd say she insulted me." Glinda turned upon the boy sternly. "You have caused us all much anxiety and annoyance," she said. "Only my magic saved you from destruction. I forbid you to get lost again." "Of course," he answered, "it won't be my fault if I get lost again. But it wasn't my fault this time." That's where we're going to end our reading for today and for this week. I hope you're enjoying the story. Come back Monday, find out more of what will happen if the council of people to help rescue Ozma and Princess Dorothy get there, and what may happen, and what Princess Dorothy and Ozma are doing as they are in the submerged island. So until Friday, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend.